Catholic Connection is a co-production of Ave Maria Radio and EWTN Radio and carried across the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And it's a Monday morning. It's February 24th, 2025. Great to be with you on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Good to be back with you live, and so appreciative to Vanessa Denhag-Armo for sitting in for me for several days, and of course my wonderful producer back in Ann Arbor, Andrew Kruchek, who always keeps up with my crazy schedule, and it has been a little bit crazy, but it's been great. Was down at EWTN last week, putting the finishing touches. I'm so excited about this and so grateful to the network for a beautiful online series that we will be releasing. It's part of the learning series for EWTN, these beautiful free courses that you can go to online. You can use it as a study. You can do it as a study at your parish or a private study. And it goes along with the books that EWTN is publishing. And this one is directly connected to my new EWTN book, Italy's Shrines and Wonders. And we're calling this Saints in Italy. Saints in Italy. So we're looking at several of the saints in Italy. All of it was shot on location in Italy, except for the open, as we say in the biz, and the close, which were shot at the beautiful Shrine of Hansville last week. So we'll have more on that as we get closer to the release. Also, we are going to keep you updated all week on the situation with the Holy Father, and I do encourage you greatly to make sure you go to all of our news outlets, the Register, Catholic News Agency, EWTN News In Depth, EWTN News Nightly. Dr. Matthew Bunson had a great piece over the weekend on an update on the Holy Father, and there's also several good stories there explaining what's happening right now. And there's some news that there's going to be some new prayer efforts of the Holy Father in Rome. And many dioceses and archdioceses around the country are also issuing special prayer efforts. As a matter of fact, over the weekend, my archdiocese, the Archdiocese of Detroit, in addition to praying for the Holy Father, which we always do during the intercessions, they're also calling for churches to add prayers. The parish has received a text over the weekend that they asked for additional prayers at the different masses. So we'll keep you up to date on all that. And of course, we have our experts, Dr. Bunson and Joan Lewis, on standby. God forbid anything happens, but we are going to be praying that the Holy Father will be released soon, and we'll get back to the business of course, he's still writing and putting out the messages, but get back to the business of being the Pope every single day there in Rome, in person. Just imagine that. I was talking to Matt Swain this morning on the Sunrise Morning Show. You know, I've been sick on and off for the last 2 weeks, and it's been a pain. And you have a lot to do, and you're busy, and you have to get your work done. But imagine having the entire church of the world on your shoulders and what that feels like, and how you would feel so frustrated if you couldn't be out there with your people. So we pray for the Holy Father, God willing, a quick recovery, but we will keep you informed. We always keep you informed on the issues coming up. We have Kristan Hawkins, president, of course, of Students for Life. And this report, thanks be to God, this is getting out there. Now, we in the pro-life movement have known this forever. And not just at Planned Parenthood, but so many abortion mills around the country and the world. There is a new report exposing botched procedures and poor conditions at Planned Parenthood abortion facilities. Now, for us, it's not exactly a newsflash. Again, we've been talking about this forever. But so glad that it is getting some coverage out there, and we'll discuss in detail with Kristan Hawkins. And then Father Ted Pacholczyk joins us, and looking forward to this conversation. He was also on World Over on Thursday. If you didn't see that interview with Raymond, you do want to check it out. We are going to be touching base with him regarding this whole situation of IVF and how important it is. I talked about this over the weekend. I actually spoke, and thanks to the ladies from the Catholic Council of Catholic Women at St. Teresa of Avila Parish in Augusta area of Georgia, Grovetown. I spoke to 200 lovely ladies on Saturday for a retreat. And I was talking about the truth of the faith, because the issue came up about IVF and how when people think that the church is being so insensitive or hypocritical because the church says it's pro-life, no, there are reasons. There are reasons the church teaches what she teaches about this issue, and we'll talk about that with Father Tad. And then wrapping up with Gail Buckley, as we always do, with the Bible verse of the week. Oh, and I wanted to mention a big thank you to my beautiful sister, Janet Bankovic, of course, Janet Williams, I should say, Bankovic Williams, of Women of Grace, radio and TV, of course, on EWTN, was on her show on Thursday. We had a blast. And then I taped 5 episodes of Women of Grace on many different topics, which will be coming up soon. And also a big air hug to Father Mitch for having me on his show last week as well. Okay, a lot to discuss this morning, and it's a busy morning. Let's do the weather real quickly, and then we'll get right into the news. We have an atmospheric river bringing heavy rain, high elevation mountain snow, and strong winds to the northwest states and northern Rockies through tomorrow. There's also a system tracking along the Gulf Coast, moving across Florida, bringing occasional strong winds and heavy rain and thunderstorms. So that's basically what it looks like across the country right now. It is already 5 minutes past the hour, and we need to get to the news on a Monday. Rory O'Neill tells us the Vatican is providing a Monday health update for Pope Francis.
The Vatican says Pope Francis slept well on his 10th night in a hospital in Rome, but he remains in critical condition. The 88-year-old is being treated for double pneumonia, but has not experienced any respiratory crisis since his condition was downgraded Saturday. Tests also show early signs of kidney failure. The Pope's prognosis remains guarded.
Meanwhile, doctors treating the Pope say the Holy Father has retained his sense of humor.
The humor is always the same. You mean Holy Pope or Holy Son? You say, good morning, Holy Pope, good morning, Holy Son. And you say, you understand that he's fine, he's more clever than you. So the humor is perfect.
Francis is 88 years old and has dealt with numerous respiratory issues and other health issues in recent years. Meanwhile, Pope Francis, as we mentioned, does remain in critical condition. People in St. Peter's Square, though, say they continue to pray for the Pope to pull through.
We do hope he recovers, and every time we walk into a church, that's what we're praying for.
I love this Pope. I feel like he's really moved the church forward.
He's a very good man. He has a good heart.
The Vatican says Francis is alert and in good spirits, but at New York's St. Patrick Cathedral, Cardinal Timothy Dolan described the Pope as being in very fragile health and probably close to death. He did not say where he got that information. And the Vatican, meanwhile, announcing an evening rosary for the Holy Father's health, began last night in St. Peter's. The director of the Holy See Press Office, Matteo Bruni, announcing to journalists that the cardinals residing in Rome, along with all collaborators of the Roman Curia and the Diocese of Rome, responding to the statements or sentiments of the people of God, gathering in St. Peter's, 9 p.m. Rome time, every night to recite the Holy Rosary for the health of the Holy Father. There has been a tremendous outpouring of support and prayer for the Pope's recovery from around the world. And in the Holy Father's Angelus address, which he chose to have published and distributed on Sunday, he thanked everyone for the prayers. And on Sunday afternoon, the Vicar General of Rome, Cardinal Baldassare Reina, celebrated a special Mass for the Pope's recovery at the Papal Basilica of St. John Lateran. And the President of Italy's Episcopal Conference, Cardinal Matteo Maria Zuppi, later that evening leading a rosary at the Basilica of San Domenico in Bologna for the same intention. Marking the third anniversary of the full-scale war against Ukraine, the Holy Father, meanwhile, also said it's a painful and shameful occasion for all of humanity. As Linda Bordoni reports in the Vatican, the Holy Father expressing this during the Angelus address.
The Pope's words came during the Angelus address on the eve of the 3-year anniversary of the full-scale Russian invasion in Ukraine. In his remarks that were published by the Holy See Press Office, as he is being treated for double pneumonia at Rome's Gemelli Hospital, the Holy Father remembered the martyred Ukraine. As I renew my solidarity with the martyred Ukrainian people, he said, I invite you to remember the victims of all armed conflicts and to pray for the gift of peace. In Palestine, Israel, and throughout the Middle East, in Myanmar, in Kivu, and in Sudan.
Pope Francis also giving his encouragement to deacons worldwide in his Angelus address yesterday, as he had done last Sunday following his hospitalization. The Holy Father did not pronounce the address, as you heard, but requested the Holy See Press Office publish the message to be at the disposal of all the faithful. In the address, the Holy Father recalling the Jubilee of Deacons underway in the Vatican, and in particular the Mass was celebrated yesterday in St. Peter's Basilica, including the ordination of several deacons. Addressing his dear brothers in the diaconate, the Pope said, you dedicate yourselves to the proclamation of the Word and to the service of charity. He likewise praised their dedication to carrying out their ministry in the Church with words and deeds, bringing God's love and mercy to all. In this spirit, the Pope said, he urged them to continue with joy and love, and said they should not be afraid to risk love. In other news this morning, President Trump welcoming French President Emmanuel Macron to the White House today. Macron has made it clear that Ukraine will be among the key topics of discussion. As Ross Cullen tells us, a French leader wants Ukraine to be part of peace negotiations so far that have included only President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin.
President Macron said that his message to his US counterpart will be, quote, "You can't be weak with President Putin. That's not who you are. It's not your trademark. It's not in your interest." He also confirmed that he was considering sending French forces into Ukraine to guarantee peace once it had been negotiated.
Meanwhile, Macron's visit coming just days before the British Prime Minister is expected to also meet with Trump in Washington. Tammy Trujillo tells us President Trump's special envoy to the Middle East believes a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas will reach its planned second phase.
Steve Witkoff told CNN's State of the Union an extension of phase one is needed, but he's confident the hostage deal can reach the next phase.
We have to get an extension of phase one, and so I'll be going into the region this week, probably Wednesday, to negotiate that.
This comes after Israel refused to release hundreds of Palestinian prisoners on Saturday in exchange for hostages already released by Hamas. Israeli officials said the prisoners wouldn't be released until Hamas guaranteed they would no longer stage disgraceful ceremonies dishonoring the hostages.
Center-right conservative Christian Democratic Union, or CDU, and its sister party, the Christian Social Union, are the winners of yesterday's closely watched election in Germany. Political correspondent Thomas Sparrow says the party leader, though, must now start talks to form a new government.
The big question now is what coalition will be formed, because in Germany, unlike in other countries, the party that finishes first does not necessarily end up governing. The party needs to then find partners to govern with.
A coalition is necessary because provisional results show the CDU alliance did not win an outright majority, getting about 28.5% of the vote. Scott Pringle tells us there are plans to close New York City's asylum seeker intake center as a number of migrants in that city's care continues to drop.
More than 173,000 migrants have gone through the Roosevelt Hotel at Manhattan since it became an intake center in the spring of 2023. At one point, it was 4,000 a week. But Mayor Eric Adams says that number has been declining and is now at 350 a week.
We're able to announce the closure of this site and help even more asylum seekers take the next steps in their journeys.
He says the intake center, along with dozens of migrant shelters, will close by June. The mayor says the city still plans on providing humanitarian care.
The Trump administration coming up, they say, with a new strategy to combat soaring egg prices. Instead of wiping out whole flocks of chickens due to a single case of the bird flu, it would be a more targeted effort. Texas Agricultural Commissioner Sid Miller is on board with the plan, saying farmers know what's best for their flocks. And Matt Madison tells us more Americans are stepping up their emergency savings.
Nearly a third of adults recently surveyed by Bankrate said they have more in an emergency fund than they did a year ago. Over half also reported having more savings set aside than credit card debt. Bankrate's chief financial analyst Greg McBride called it evidence that more Americans have been able to make progress in building their emergency savings as the pace of inflation has slowed.
And finally, in our news segment on a Monday morning, February 24th, at about 14 minutes past the hour, MSNBC liberal mainstay Joy Reid's show has been canceled as part of a major overhaul by the network's new president. That, according to a report in the New York Times. The 7 p.m. program hosted by the ardent Trump critic will be replaced by a new panel show featuring a number of co-hosts, including Alicia Menendez, Michael Steele, and Simone Sanders Townsend. The final episode of Reid's show will air sometime this week, ending a mainstay of the network's lineup for the past 5 years. Reid is one of the most prominent Trump bashers in the mainstream media, has long been serving as anchor at the network, hosting the weekend talk show AM Joy since 2016, before being named anchor of the 7 p.m. slot in 2020. She has made a series of infamous rants in recent months, including telling Trump supporters to make your own dinner at Thanksgiving, saying they should suffer the consequences of their votes. In December, Nielsen Media Research revealed that she had lost almost half of her viewers since the election, with MSNBC seeing a whopping 53% drop in primetime viewership following the election results, before rebounding a little bit before in the 4 weeks following the inauguration. It is a Monday morning. It's February 24th. Kristan Hawkins, president of Students for Life, joins us talking about a shocking report concerning Planned Parenthood that isn't so shocking to those of us who have been saying this for years. We'll be right back.
Do you own popular index mutual funds or ETFs? If so, you're automatically own shares of companies that conflict with your moral beliefs. Ave Maria mutual funds are managed to conform to pro-life and pro-family values. Long-term investors can invest in the no-load Ave Maria mutual funds. The experienced professional portfolio managers make decisions based on investment fundamentals and pro-life values. You can learn more about Ave Maria Mutual Funds today at 866-AVE-MARIA or visit AveMariaFunds.com.
People ask how they can care for older family members who can't fully care for themselves. One answer is Visiting Angels, America's choice in senior home care. Visiting Angels assists adults nationwide with 600 locations to continue living at home and not have to move into a nursing home. Their caregivers provide assistance in hygiene, meals, and light housework. Services are provided up to 24 hours per day, and you can select your caregiver before service begins. More information, including franchise opportunities, is on the web at visitingangels.com.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
You remember the time I said on the air, go to confession. And when you're done, go out and have a big ice cream soda. Celebrate. And a man wrote to me, he said, you know, I hadn't gone to confession in 30 years. Do you mind if I went and had a pizza? I said, oh, have 20 pizzas.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
This program brought to you in part by Ave Maria, Florida, a big kind of small town where golf carts take you everywhere and there's always something fun around the corner. Discover championship golf, resort-style amenities, and a town center full of shopping and dining. With Ave Maria University and Ave Maria Catholic Church at its heart, it's a community full of connection and charm. More than 25 model homes are available for viewing. More information can be found at AveMaria.com. That's AveMaria.com.
This is something that pro-lifers have been talking about for years, and so many people have been on the front lines of this, trying to expose what's happening, especially at Planned Parenthood, because they're the largest abortion provider, but at other facilities. We've had so many problems here in the state of Michigan, for example. And that's when we even had laws in place to protect women and give them basic health regulations at these so-called, and I'm doing the air quotes now, clinics, which they're not clinics. I mean, a clinic is where people go to get better, not to go to get killed, okay? Especially when we're talking about the unborn child. Kristan Hawkins is the president of Students for Life Action. So, Kristan, when I saw this report, I was like, thanks be to God, but at the same time, it's not exactly a news flash for us. Let's talk about the report. What did it say? Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, well, there's a new report came out last Sunday from the New York Times, of all places. Mm-hmm. And the headline was pretty shocking. Botched care and tired staff, Planned Parenthood in crisis. And it goes on to detail complaints from staff saying they're not getting paid enough, that there's very high staff turnover, that, you know, patients have had failed abortions. There's lawsuits going on where women thought they had paid to end the life of their child, only to find out they were still pregnant. IUDs, misplaced. One story, I remember reading this article, was talking about an overflowing bathroom that was putting sewage into the recovery room. So women were getting nauseous and sick because of the sewage that was seeping into the room. It's not, as you said, Teresa, nothing about this article is shocking to those of us in the pro-life movement. I would say, however, it is extremely important to see that the New York Times is now covering this. And I think that's something that, you know, there's a couple of questions I had of, well, why would they talk about this? Or New York Times is obviously not suddenly anti-Planned Parenthood. I think the reason you've seen this article, they're attempting to try to paint a woe is me story of Planned Parenthood, right when the national discussion and narrative has been focusing on cutting bad actors, cutting wasteful spending in our government, and, you know, Planned Parenthood getting nearly $700 million tax dollars from us every single year. That should be a pretty big item on Doge and Elon Musk's chopping block. And I think we've started to see, I've certainly seen it on X and social media. You know, it's not now just pro-life leaders calling for defunding Planned Parenthood. You're starting to see mainstream conservatives. I was actually at CPAC last week. Our entire, weekend of activities, display, and guerrilla marketing was go tell Planned Parenthood to fund themselves. Just this week, we're going to be announcing a commercial that's going to be on Fox News every morning for 2 weeks, urging President Trump to stop funding his political enemies at Planned Parenthood. I really do think the writing is on the wall for Planned Parenthood, and this was, I think, one of their sob stories that they really wanted to paint.
Well, I'm looking at this, and by the way, we're talking with Kristan Hawkins, of course, the president of Students for Life Action, about this new report that was, as she mentioned, published in the New York Times and all places. And, I mean, it's pretty grim and it's pretty clear. But, again, this is something that we've been aware of for a long time. In a bombshell report by the New York Times published Saturday, I'm reading from a Fox News story, over 50 current and former Planned Parenthood executives, consultants, and medical staff from affiliates alleged they worked under poor conditions, rock-bottom salaries, even as a national organization raked in hundreds of millions of dollars in donations after the fall of Roe v. Wade, not to mention, of course, the government support that they get. But if the New York Times, and we don't know what's in their heads, but if the New York Times is trying to do a pity party story for Planned Parenthood, how does this paint them in a good way? I mean, why would you continue to go forward with money?
I don't think it achieved what they thought it was going to achieve. I will tell you that, because it just came across very clear that Planned Parenthood, and even in the article they talk about how Planned Parenthood National, the federation, is flush with cash, yet the affiliates are scraping by. And this is something that we've known. This is why defunding Planned Parenthood is so important to the pro-life movement, because, you know, the affiliates apply for these federal grants themselves. And we've known for a long time, many of the affiliates, they've got different clinics under them. So there's about 70, 69 affiliates of Planned Parenthood throughout the country. And so they operate a lot of clinics in the fiscal red, meaning their abortion facility, their big facility, covers the deficit that the other facilities generate. And they use taxpayer dollars to keep a lot of these clinics that operate in the red operational. And so that's why defunding Planned Parenthood is such a critical goal, because it would force them, because nearly 40%, if not more, of their income every year comes from us, the taxpayers. If they lose 40% of that funding, they're going to be forced to shut down a number of their clinics that have been operating in the red. And this article from the New York Times and this expose clearly shows aren't doing well, that they don't have money to basically pay for, plumbing, that they're allowing, sewage to back up in their facilities. So I think this is really big. It also shows you, Teresa, that there's a fight brewing, a sinking ship. There's a lot of people who start passing off the blame. And I think you started to see that in this article, as you mentioned, of these 50 staff and consultants and executives all starting to sort of say, well, it's not our fault. Our clinic can't stay up because of this reason or this reason. And then some of them are starting to pass the blame to Planned Parenthood National, the federation, which is, one of the leading funders of democratic politics in the country.
Right.
And I think they have this, and they've had this for a while. We've seen exposés like this come out before, where the clinic staff gets very frustrated at the number of dollars and the attention that the national staff spends on politics. And I've seen quotes before of past articles of people complaining of, well, if we're really a care organization, why are we putting this much money into politics? But they have to put money into politics because they know the pro-life movement is out to end abortion. And so they've got a hard job to try to convince Donald Trump to continue to fund them, even though they put, all of their political dollars against him in 2024. They've got a hard job convincing Americans why we should continue to fund them when their own clinics and affiliate staff are saying they're offering substandard care. I mean, the bottom line is, and the winning argument I see on college campuses is we don't need Planned Parenthood. We have more than 8,000 fairly qualified health centers across America, nearly 6,000 to provide women's health care. If every single Planned Parenthood was shut down tomorrow, each FQHC, fairly qualified health center, which are true nonprofits, would only need to see 2 more patients a week. There would not be a crisis of care as Planned Parenthood has tried to paint or, scare Americans into thinking. Not at all. In fact, if you look at their last annual report, you'll find that their number of clients continues to go down. Their number of, quote, good services, so there's things they do that doesn't kill babies. For the past 15 years, those services continue to decline. The only thing on the up in Planned Parenthood is abortion and wrong-sex transgender hormone therapy, which sterilizes gender-confused young people.
Right, and they're starting to push that more and more because they know there's money in it. But Kristan, we come back. We have about a minute left. I want to talk a little bit more also about some of these people at the top of Planned Parenthood saying that these reports are from disgruntled employees. 50 people are all disgruntled from around the country. Every single one of them, according to this particular person at Planned Parenthood, says they're a disgruntled employee. But this has got to stop, and this is not just at Planned Parenthood. You and I and so many of us in the pro-life movement know this, and we've had problems consistently. Dr. Monica Miller exposed over 15 years ago problems at independent abortion facilities where women's medical information was being dumped in the bins where people could go and get them. But it's all about reproductive health care, and they care about women. More with Kristan Hawkins, president for Students for Life Action, when we come back.
Living the Beatitudes with Father Bjorn.
Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. If you're on a football team, you don't want to just run up and down the field holding the ball and never cross into the end zone and get a touchdown. We want to reach our goal, but there are a lot of obstacles, discouragement, and challenges along the way. Jesus' voice is the one calling us to say yes to him, to live the life that he is calling us to live. We have to choose one way or the other, choose him or not. But if we choose him, we will be opposed. We're going to have people challenge what we believe or call us crazy. But Jesus doesn't just say, come follow me, to follow a beatitude. He's calling us to be like himself. He is the Beatitudes. He doesn't just say, do what I say. He says, come follow me. He's with us every step of the way, transforming our weakness into strength. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
For more about the Beatitudes, visit EWTNRC.com.
It's time for Family Man with Dr. Gregory Popcak.
Parents often complain that their kids either don't do their chores or don't do a good job with them. How can parents teach kids to do chores well? The easiest way to teach kids healthy attitudes toward chores is to create family work rituals, where families do chores together. Daily family work rituals give parents and kids an opportunity to work side by side, learning good stewardship, responsibility, and teamwork. Family work rituals provide on-the-job training for chores, so that when kids eventually get their own chores, they know what's expected of them and how to do them well. That's one reason family rituals for working together are such an important part of Catholic family life. To discover more ways your family can celebrate the liturgy of domestic church life, check out the newest editions of Parenting with Grace and visit CatholicCounselors.com. I'm Dr. Greg Popcak, but you can call me Family Man.
To discover more ways faith can enrich your life, visit CatholicCounselors.com.
Thanks for tuning in to Catholic Connection on a Monday morning, February 24th, chatting with Kristan Hawkins, president of Students for Life Action, about a report that came out and published in the New York Times. Shocker. But as Kristan was saying, we think it may be their attempt to try to get sympathy for the organization, which has become under scrutiny, thanks be to God. Finally, they are receiving hundreds of millions of dollars every year from all of us, right, taxpayers, not to mention all the donations they get from people who, want to keep them in business, and it is a very big business. What's interesting is that there were 50 people, Kristan, as we were talking before the break on air, some 50-plus people from around the country contributed to this report, and you have the head of, according to the article, Planned Parenthood Action Fund telling the Times that these complaints are from disgruntled workers and are anecdotal and not reflective of the overall quality of care patients. Now, I'm sorry, if you're doing a story and you have one or two people who come to you as a reporter, okay, you always have to say, all right, obviously you have to get the other side of the story. And because if it's one or two people, could be that they have an axe to grind, could be a disgruntled worker. But when you have just the numbers alone, 50 people, lawsuits, different issues that have come up, Houston, we have a problem, correct?
Yeah, we absolutely have a problem. And I agree with you that you always have disgruntled employees, right? I speak as someone who manages people, right? And you have to look at that. But this isn't what this story is. This wasn't one or two people saying, hey, I didn't get my pay raise, or I'm angry about this. This also went deeper than just the employees. It went into patients, and patients who had received substandard care, botched abortions at Planned Parenthood, IUDs put into the wrong spot. I mean, IUDs are, I tell girls who don't even agree with me, please do not get an IUD. I know you don't agree with me about birth control, and you're still going to use birth control, but do not put an IUD into your body. It is so dangerous, and this is why it was banned on our market for so long, right? So this wasn't that. And I think for the New York Times, and even to have Planned Parenthood reaching out to all these employees, Planned Parenthood knew that the New York Times was going to be writing a story. You know, if a media outlet like the New York Times is reaching out to a number of my employees, I know about it within a few moments, right? Right. They knew they were writing the story. I think, like what we talked about in the first segment is they thought this was going to be a sob story. They thought this was going to be something to help gain public sympathy for them right before this defunding measure comes up. Hopefully we start to see House and Senate Republicans working together to defund them in the budget reconciliation process. We only have like a month and a half left to go on that. And so we've been pushing, every national pro-life group has been united and working together to try to push the GOP up on the Hill to do the hard thing, to do the thing to finally defund Planned Parenthood. But this didn't turn out that way. I think, and I don't know this reporter. We were talking about this. I know most of all the abortion reporters at the New York Times from a number of interviews over the years. So I don't know if this isn't the story she attended. Sometimes when they start to write stories, Teresa, as you know, as a journalist, they don't always end up how you think they're going to be. And so I think that to me is what seems like it happened there with this article. And I just think it's absolutely shocking and tells you the writing is on the wall for the facility. I don't know if the New York Times is angry with the Planned Parenthood. I mean, there's still a lot of blame game going on in the Democratic political world about how they lost the 2024 election. Planned Parenthood was an outspoken Kamala supporter, put almost $70 million into her campaign, according to the last PBS article I read about this. So I don't know if this is a way to once again get back at Planned Parenthood for, quote, unquote, allowing Donald Trump to get elected. But the blame game is still going on, and I think this is going to be part of it. And I think this is the challenge for Planned Parenthood because they're not just, quote, a health clinic. They are the leading, one of the leading voices in Democratic politics. They're also a Democrat propaganda machine. And so this goes well beyond, this may go well beyond just people being angry with their care. And I'm so glad to see this in general. I mean, I went undercover at Planned Parenthood. I was pregnant with my first son 16 years ago, and it was a federally funded Planned Parenthood in Trenton, New Jersey. There was a security guard there, and I just remember walking in. I was asking them what to do because I was pregnant, and telling them I think I have an adverse prenatal diagnosis, and I never released the video of that particular visit I did because the woman who counseled me almost was pro-life. And I didn't want this one woman to get fired because I thought, well, if she has to work here, at least she didn't counsel me to have an abortion. But I just remember though the facility. It was so dirty. I mean, I just kept thinking, why would anyone come here for health care? It was
any type of care, right?
Yeah, everyone was angry. Everyone. I mean, this was years ago. This was before Donald Trump, and everyone had Trump derangement syndrome, right? They were angry. There were like posters on the wall of pro-life activists of like, if don't let these people in, and kept thinking the only reason women are coming here is because they're desperate and they think they need to have an abortion. That's the only reason you would go to such a dirty, federally funded facility like that.
But think of how long this has been ignored, though, Kristan. And you know this because you've been in the pro-life movement for a long time. I mean, you think about, we've been talking about this. You and I have been talking about this. Dr. Miller and I have been talking about this. Every single, Sean Carney, every single pro-life activist has been trying to raise awareness, not just obviously about the evils of abortion, but that these so-called clinics are not places that are safe. And that's why we tried to get some regulations in place. For example, before our current governor in Michigan in the last election, we had a lot of regulations, not that they followed them all the time, but that they could be called out on.
Yeah.
And at least we knew the regulations and the restrictions were there, but they've totally been stripped away. But even before that, I can remember going past these local abortion mills, and you're right, they were disgustingly dirty. Who would want to show up and yeah, who are the people that they're impacting the most? The people that they claim they care about the most, the poor in the inner city.
Yeah, I think that's what's so shocking when you hear the testimonials from clients at pregnancy resource centers across the country, right? You go into these volunteer, non-taxpayer funded pregnancy resource centers, and they're welcoming, they're beautiful, they're clean, they're positive, they're joyful. It's a night and day difference between that and a Planned Parenthood. And you see that in the client testimonials of women who are coming into these centers pregnancy centers going, I actually felt like I was cared for, that I was loved here. And that first impression that they're getting is a night and day difference from going into a rundown, dirty, and as the New York Times has now proven, unhappy working environment at Planned Parenthood. And I think that's why, our pregnancy centers and the work that our pregnancy centers do in all of our communities is just so absolutely critical. And I think it's such a shame that nearly 75% of our neighbors don't know that they exist. And that's, my number one charge to pro-life audiences. Anytime I get a microphone in front of pro-lifers is talking about promoting what it is we do and how much we care, because, this article just proves that they don't care. I mean, why can't they clean up their facility? They make $2 billion a year, Teresa.
Right.
$2 billion, and yet they can't hire a plumber. It's because they put their money in politics, not in care, because that's what they really care about. It's keeping abortion legal, not helping actual women.
Amen. Kristan, I think this is the tip of the iceberg. I think we are going to see more, thanks be to God, and things are starting to come out. So we pray for the truth to be revealed, and we need to call our representatives and tell them to defund Planned Parenthood. Thanks, Kristan. God bless you. Keep up the great work. Father Tad up next. Stay tuned.
What does the Catholic Catechism teach concerning the natural human curiosity and desire to know the future? Paragraph 2115 counsels us that a sound Christian attitude consists in putting oneself confidently in the hands of Providence for whatever concerns the future, and giving up all unhealthy curiosity about it. What does the Catechism condemn as unhealthy curiosity? All forms of divination, deifying objects as persons, are to be rejected, as are consulting horoscopes, astrology, palm readings, interpretations of omens and lots, clairvoyance, and mediums. All these venues conceal a desire for power over time, history, and other human beings, powers that belong to God alone. This is Peggy Stanton, and this has been the Order of Malta's Minute with the Catechism.
Dr. Ray Guarendi.
Two of the hardest words to say in the English language. I'm sorry. I'll ask couples, when was the last time you said I'm sorry? I think it was our wedding rehearsal dinner. I spilled some coffee on her lap. I said, hey, sorry about that. Why is I'm sorry so hard to say? What does it mean to you? Are you saying you're a failure? Are you saying I'm wrong? Are you saying, if I say I'm sorry, I'm admitting it's all my fault? I'm sorry are two of the softest words in a relationship in the English language. I'm sorry, very hard to say, very easy on relationships.
Welcome back. Continuing our pro-life discussion. That's because we are your pro-life network, EWTN, and always great having the so well-spoken and so well-informed, our friend, Father Pacholczyk from National Catholic Bioethics Center. Great job on the world over the other night, Father. Really appreciate it. So here's the thing. This is really interesting. I wonder really who's advising the president on this issue of IVF, because in so many ways he's with us on so many of the pro-life issues in terms of, even though he is calling himself pro-choice, he does want limits on abortion. He doesn't want it to be, federally funded in any way. And he also is very much in favor of free speech and freedom of religion. And yet, for some reason on this IVF issue, somebody is telling him this is a good thing. And I'm just wondering who's advising him. I know we don't know that, who's on the inside in the administration, but what is this latest effort, and what can we do about it to raise awareness as Catholics? Good morning. Thanks for joining us, Father.
Yeah, great to join you, Teresa. I think it's an interesting question of who's advising the president on this. I've wondered the same thing. And clearly, there's a tacit assumption that's seriously flawed here, namely that IVF is a good thing, because then he issues this executive order that promotes it very vigorously, it appears. I think to sort of cut to the chase with this, I think my sense or my suspicion would be that he indeed is, pro-life in his essential outlook, but that he hasn't seen here the issue, and really what needs to be done instead is to recognize that IVF has become a huge industry, multi-billion-dollar industry, and it's an industry that is completely without regulation. And so if you ask yourself, what should the president really be doing here? He should be regulating this, not sort of throwing open the doors by encouraging funding and by, saying we're going to cooperate with what this mega industry is doing. And so regulation is something that's long overdue in our country. We haven't had much of it. Really, for the most part, when we talk about the IVF industry, it's quote-unquote self-regulation that they talk about. And, that doesn't mean much, as we're all aware. Basically means if it earns a profit that we move forward. And so I think if the president's advisors had instead said to him, hey, let's look at the laws in Italy and Germany that they've passed there, that would be the kind of thing we'd want to see, which would be not completely pro-life, but it would certainly be more in that direction, in the sense that they say in those countries, if you do IVF, you're only allowed to make 3 embryos total, all of whom must be implanted into mom. So no extras, no freezing of embryos, no experimenting on embryos, no cloning of embryos, the whole 9 yards. And that would be a very reasonable direction for, a pro-life president to adopt. So I'm kind of disappointed, I must say, with the fact that this executive order came out the way it did. And I'm just hoping that, it's still early, and what he's actually doing is saying, let's get information, let's find out how we can do this. He's not actually promulgating anything yet that's going to significantly change the landscape.
Are you aware, and by the way, we're talking with Father Chad Pacholczyk from the National Catholic Bioethics Center, are you aware of people in the pro-life movement? I know many of them are working with this administration that are making a specific effort related to the IVF issue, Father?
Yeah, I know there's a great deal of concern around this, and I'm not sure, who is sort of attempting to redirect the dialogue in a direction that it needs to go. But I think it's important that all of us as Catholics continue to try to clarify this. And, I know, for example, Raymond Arroyo brought this up in person with the president, and the president was a little bit like, oh, well, if there's an issue here and we need conscience protections kind of thing, then we should look into that. And it seemed like there was the potential for some receptivity. But, I think there needs to be more discussion and dialogue here to help clarify the outlines of the issue and to really point out to the president that this is not a good, even though it looks like it's a good. And yet, even as I say that, Teresa, I want to praise the president. There's one line in his executive order. It goes like this: my administration recognizes the importance of family formation. And as a nation, our public policy must make it easier for loving and longing mothers and fathers to have children. Well, kudos, that's a good end. The problem is he's choosing means that are disordered to that end.
Right.
And really what he should be doing instead is, for example, funding and promoting real treatments for infertility, and figuring out what are the underlying causes. Why are people infertile? many times that can be addressed, but it's not oftentimes covered by insurance. So let's make sure we address that kind of thing. And then, take a few other steps as well, like to incentivize stay-at-home moms, to support and encourage larger families through tax breaks and through other kinds of, endeavors that make sure that families can raise an abundant family if that's the direction they go.
It's often much like in terms of, I was just talking with Kristan Hawkins from Students for Life Action. There's this new report from the New York Times out about, believe it or not, all these problems at the Planned Parenthood facilities in terms of unsafe conditions, uncleanliness, that there's lawsuits because of medical issues with botched abortions and whatnot. There has been a message out there that abortion is great on the one end, then IVF is great on the other. You can have children if you want them, don't have children if you don't want them. But just like the abortion industry, as you mentioned, Father, it's so unregulated, this industry of IVF. It's like the wild, wild west. How many times have you been on this show talking about these lawsuits against these doctors who have these God complexes? And instead, it's just, there's horror stories, and there's so many lawsuits in this industry, not to mention it's gone up to, I heard a story over the weekend, $20,000 for just one application in terms of going through the IVF procedure, $20,000. And then you look at, and there's no guarantee, but then you look at all the other problems and the health issues around this as well, in addition to what happens to the embryos.
Yeah, absolutely. For example, birth defects in the offspring that are born from IVF, it's roughly double the rate of a normally conceived child. And, all the other, I call it collateral damage that, spins out of control sideways as you go into this. You have sex selection of the embryos. You're trying to choose particular traits that you'd like, maybe to have blue eyes, that sort of thing. And even the question of screening out particular diseases, and then you create extra embryos that are frozen and destroyed, and then the selective reductions where, you mentioned the abortion issue here. It makes its appearance in this venue as well, because if you implant 3 or 4 embryos and they all take, you have triplets or quads, and then you've got to do the selective reduction. And you don't have to, but that's often what's counseled. And then this is for the benefit, supposedly, of the remaining 1 or 2 embryos in the uterus so they can grow better. So we do see how this is, all connected. It's not a pro-life technology at its core. It has a death-dealing edge. There's a lot of collateral damage. And it's a kind of instrumentalization, to use the fancy word, of human beings, where we're treating them like products that can be bought and sold. You mentioned the $20,000 price tag. The reality is that this is commercially driven, and when large sums of money become involved, the ethical lines suddenly get very, very fuzzy in everybody's mind, and it's really a tragedy.
But the stories don't get out there, and they need to get out there. We're talking to Father Tad Pacholczyk. You can find him, in addition to the amazing work at the National Catholic Bioethics Center, his official website, fathertad.com, and the word father is spelled out, fathertad.com. I've heard many pro-lifers say that now at least we have a seat at the table with this administration when it comes to these major issues. Would you agree with that, Father?
I certainly would. I think that's, it's been a sea change from the previous administration with our, previous president who was Catholic, surprisingly, but didn't feel that we had a place at the table at all. So, yes, this is a remarkable change. And, we have to continue to work and to get our message out. I think there's likely to be some receptivity to it, some ability to hear, when previously it was very, very difficult to get a hearing.
People don't know, or they think they know what the church teaches, and they disagree with the church on this, which you can't. This is not a matter of prudential judgment. This is faith and morals, because this is intrinsically evil. But they don't understand why the church teaches what she teaches on this. I mean, you briefly explained it and very eloquently, but I was talking at a women's retreat on Saturday, and some of these issues come up, and I say, look, this is on the Feast of Chair of St. Peter, right, the Chair of Peter the Apostle. And I said, there is a reason we have this body of teaching and magisterium. Everything comes from Christ, but is passed down through the apostolic suggestions. And before you criticize the church on these teachings, do you really know what the teachings are? How many of us really know and take the time to read the catechism or look up the documents on IVF? And one woman went so far as to say, in a question, I think she was just asking questions, how come the church or the bishops haven't said anything about transgender ideology? And I said they had, and I quoted the documents. I said, don't assume because you're hearing something from someone that this is what the church is doing this way or that way. We have to educate ourselves on the faith.
Yeah, and, I think it's also fair to say that the church tends to actually be ahead of the curve. For example, when Dolly the sheep was cloned, already the church had issued guidance on human cloning. So, the church thinks about these matters, the church ponders them, the church has the principles that are needed here to offer clarity. And so you're absolutely right. A lot of times people just haven't bothered to even do a simple Google search and find out from a reliable source on the internet, what does the church teach here? It's gotten so easy to get this information. And yet people still don't do it many times. And, I say if they handled their work responsibilities with such a casual attitude, they'd be fired. They'd be fired.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Father, always great to catch up with you. Thank you for your insight and your very clear and beautiful explanations. Of course, Father Tad Pacholczyk. Find him at fathertad.com. I would highly recommend you bring him in for a talk or a presentation at your parish or your diocese. You can also find his great work at the National Center, Catholic Bioethics Center in Philly. FatherTad.com. The word Father is spelled out. We'll be right back on a Monday morning, wrapping up with our Scripture Verse of the Week. Stay tuned.
People ask how they can care for older family members who can't fully care for themselves. One answer is Visiting Angels, America's choice in senior home care. Visiting Angels assists adults nationwide with 600 locations to continue living at home and not have to move into a nursing home. Their caregivers provide assistance in hygiene, meals, and light housework. Services are provided up to 24 hours per day, and you can select your caregiver before service begins. More information, including franchise opportunities, is on the web at visitingangels.com.
Hello, Steve Ray here. We're going to Normandy, France in November to celebrate the 80th anniversary of D-Day. We'll also be in Paris for the opening of the resurrected Notre Dame Cathedral. Join us on a pilgrimage of discovery through the saints and shrines of France. Catherine Labourier and the Miraculous Medal, St. Therese of Lisieux, the incorrupt body of Vincent de Paul, a dinner cruise through Paris on the Seine River, and so much more.
Find the Ave Maria Radio travel tab at AveMariaRadio.net. Italy aficionado Teresa Tomio's newest book is now out on the Ave Maria online store. In Italy's Shrines and Wonders, Teresa Tomio provides how best to navigate the most popular sites, best routes, and how to best to soak in all the beauty Italy has to offer. She also shares the most inspiring journeys to make your Italy excursion utterly unforgettable. Italy's Shrines and Wonders from Catholic Connections Teresa Tomio can be purchased at AveMariaRadio.net.
Underwritten in part by the following nonprofit.
Are you paying high prices with a traditional health insurance company that pays for things that violate your conscience? There's an alternative available. Solidarity HealthShare is a community of faithful individuals and families that never share into immoral medical services, all while saving you money with prices starting as low as $85 per month for singles and $512 for families. Never fund another abortion with your healthcare dollars. 844-313-4999 to learn more.
I just love the verse for today. It's a great way to wrap up the program, especially after marking the chair of St. Peter on Saturday, the Apostle Peter. I will build my church and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Matthew 16:18. Gail, love this verse. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Absolutely. Well, the whole verse, of course, when Jesus says that you are Peter and I put on this rock, I'll build my church. But I want to focus on the last part today, that the gates of hell will never prevail against it. Because, Jesus made this promise, and he, about his church. Of course, it's the Catholic Church he's speaking about. And that means the church will never be destroyed, and it will remain until the end of time when he comes back. And it's already survived like 2,000 years. That in itself, I think, Teresa, proves that, he's keeping his promise. It's pretty amazing considering that many members, even popes, have been very corrupt throughout history, and the fact that it's still, strong. And it's the largest Christian church in the world. And the church currently has 1.38 billion baptized Catholics.
Billion.
Worldwide.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Billion. Yeah, it's amazing. And, of course, it's the only church founded by Jesus Christ. And all the other Christian churches have been founded by mere men, like King Henry VIII and Martin Luther and so on. I researched this recently, Teresa, just to be sure I have my facts correct. And I know you know this, but there are now over 45,000 different Christian denominations worldwide. 45,000. And that's really sad because Jesus, we'd all be one. And these prideful men, or men and women, have broken away from his church for many different reasons. Henry VIII wanted to divorce his wife and marry his mistress, but the Pope refused to give him annulment. So he left the church and started the Anglican Church, which in the America is the Episcopal Church. And then Martin Luther was once a Catholic monk, and he left the Catholic Church, married a nun, of course, an ex-nun, and he started the Lutheran Church. And since then, it's been one after another. It's broken away and splintered off, and so now we have 45,000 different ones. And, some of them, have a few sacraments. Some of them have no sacraments. Many make up their own creeds, and they disagree on things such as baptism and salvation, and they all of them interpret the Bible differently. Sadly, many teach the false doctrine of once saved, always saved, which means that, if they receive Christ as their Savior, they can never lose that salvation regardless of what they do, and of course the Bible strongly advises against that. It's so wrong. The Bible makes it clear that, sin separates us from God and nothing impure will enter heaven. So, so even if the gates of hell never prevail against the church, that doesn't mean that all Catholics will be saved, and that means that we have to, we really have to be vigilant and, fighting for our church. We have to, be... Okay, I know our time's up. So
yeah, time's up. But you know what? Let's go back to that verse. Let's jot this down, Matthew 16:18, and really ponder on it this week and beyond. We'll see you tomorrow. Ciao.
You've been listening to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo. Catholic Connection is a co-production of Ave Maria Radio and EWTN Radio, and carried across the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Our producer is Andrew Kruchek. For copies of this program or for more information, visit AveMariaRadio.net. That's AVEMariaRadio.net. Thanks for listening, and join us next time for another edition of Catholic Connection.